Have you ever wondered why some women speak less yet command more attention than those who fill every silence with words? It is a mystery that men sense instinctively, a phenomenon rooted not in manipulation, but in the profound alignment of presence, autonomy, and unconscious power. The silent woman is not empty. She is full, brimming with an interior life so rich and self-contained that her absence of chatter becomes an invitation to the unseen, a canvas for projection, longing, and unacknowledged desire. Jung would describe her as an archetype, a living embodiment of the feminine unconscious, the sovereign presence that stirs shadows, awakens obsession, and illuminates the depths of male psyche. Her quiet is not passivity. It is magnetic, a force that commands attention without demand, that reveals without explaining, and that fascinates precisely because it cannot be possessed. The first secret lies in the space she creates. The intentional absence of words becomes a mirror for the ego. Men are drawn to fill silence with interpretation, compelled to analyze, anticipate, and project onto her. Each pause, each measured glance, each withheld confession acts as a psychological amplifier, heightening desire while intensifying introspection. He does not see a lack, he sees a challenge, an enigma that forces him into self-reflection. Every question he cannot answer, every reaction he cannot predict, activates his shadow, his insecurities, his unacknowledged attachments, and the patterns of longing he often denies. This is not accidental. It is the natural consequence of encountering a woman who refuses to compromise her inner world for the comfort or comprehension of another. Her silence demands respect, not because she demands it explicitly, but because the unconscious recognizes the power inherent in a mind and heart fully inhabited. The second secret resides in her detachment from the compulsions of relational validation. She speaks when it is meaningful, responds when it aligns with her integrity, and withdraws when engagement serves only to perpetuate projection, drama, or ego inflation. This discernment creates an invisible gravity. Men sense the absence of necessity, the refusal to perform or comply, and they are drawn irresistibly to the authenticity that radiates from such alignment. Her detachment is not rejection. It is a recalibration of relational dynamics, a subtle but profound realignment of energy that calls forth desire without pleading. In this space, attraction is not manufactured through effort or proximity, but emerges organically as an acknowledgement of autonomy. Her silence becomes a declaration. She exists fully for herself, and in doing so, she illuminates the contrast between compulsive pursuit and conscious presence. The third secret is woven into the alchemy of mystery itself. Men are psychologically attuned to patterns, yet the silent woman resists complete comprehension. Her thoughts, desires, and intentions are not readily available. They are hinted at, suggested, never fully exposed. This opacity awakens the unconscious, activating curiosity, longing, and projection in equal measure. Desire is heightened not by what is said, but by what is left unsaid. Fascination emerges not from presence alone, but from the tension of the unknown. Jung's work on shadow projection illuminates this dynamic. When confronted with ambiguity, the psyche instinctively seeks completion, often projecting fantasies, expectations, and emotional needs onto the figure of the silent woman. She becomes simultaneously a mirror and a mystery, reflecting unconscious truths while remaining untouchable in her sovereignty. Men feel compelled, drawn into the orbit of her interior world, unable to possess it yet irresistibly magnetized by it. Her silence, then, is not emptiness but potency, a reservoir of selfhood that sustains her while compelling awareness in others. It is an act of psychological sovereignty, a refusal to dilute presence for consumption, a deliberate cultivation of boundaries that protect energy and amplify influence. The silent woman is acutely attuned to her own rhythms, desires, and principles, and this attunement radiates outward, creating a field of psychological tension and fascination. Men experience this tension as both desire and disorientation, the simultaneous pull of attraction and the challenge of non-possession. They are confronted with the raw reality that the deepest connections are not forged through incessant communication or performative intimacy, but through authenticity, alignment, and the quiet assertion of self. And yet, the silent woman's power is paradoxical. She exerts influence not by demanding attention, but by claiming herself fully. She inhabits her life as an extension of her interior sovereignty, aligning action with value, speech with necessity, and presence with authenticity. Each measured response, each withheld confession, each carefully curated absence is a brushstroke in the portrait of an archetype who is whole, magnetic, and profoundly self-directed. Men sense this wholeness unconsciously. It resonates in their desire, fascinates in their longing, and unsettles in their recognition of what they cannot command. Her silence teaches lessons in shadow awareness, emotional accountability, and the nature of attraction that words alone could never convey. In the delicate tension between what she reveals and what she withholds, she becomes a force of irresistible curiosity and unconscious reflection. Every glance, every pause, every quiet gesture carries weight beyond articulation, drawing observers into a dynamic that is at once intimate and untouchable. Her presence is a lesson in power without aggression, allure without performance, and influence without manipulation. The man who encounters her is compelled not by possession but by projection, not by argument but by the magnetic resonance of her autonomy, not by speech but by the profound gravity of her silence. Her silence is, in many ways, a crucible for the masculine psyche. It forces introspection where superficiality once reigned, compelling men to confront the unseen layers of their own desires, fears, and unprocessed wounds. Each unanswered question, each pause that is not filled with explanation, activates the ego's insecurities and illuminates the shadows lurking beneath the surface of attachment and expectation. He realizes that attraction is more than proximity, more than words, more than the illusion of control. It is an interaction with the authentic self, an engagement with presence that cannot be faked or coerced. In this space, obsession often awakens, not from manipulation, but from the natural gravitational pull of integrity and mystery. Jung would note that such encounters trigger projection. The man begins to see in her what he has refused to acknowledge in himself, and in doing so, he becomes an unconscious participant in her narrative of autonomy. Yet the silent woman does not wield this effect as a weapon. Her quiet is not designed to provoke or dominate. It is an organic expression of self-possession. She recognizes the difference between silence born of necessity and silence born of strategy. Each pause she takes, each measured absence, is rooted in alignment with her inner truth. She speaks when it matters, acts when it is intentional, and withdraws when engagement would dilute her energy or compromise her authenticity. The effect on men is profound because it reflects a principle deeply encoded in the unconscious. Value is revealed through restraint, desire is amplified by autonomy, and influence flows from integrity rather than pursuit. She embodies the paradox that what is unobtainable in absence often becomes irresistible in perception. The magnetic pull of the silent woman also stems from the interplay of curiosity and imagination. By withholding the totality of her inner life, she invites speculation, reflection, and longing. Her intentions are glimpsed rather than broadcast. Her thoughts are suggested rather than spelled out. In this ambiguity, the unconscious engages, filling the gaps with projection, fascination, and desire. Men are drawn to her precisely because they cannot fully grasp her, because she refuses to simplify or conform to their expectations. The tension between what is known and what is hidden generates a psychological resonance that is both compelling and transformative. Her silence is not emptiness. It is a space in which the mind of another is challenged, stirred, and captivated. She is an archetype of feminine sovereignty, a figure whose quiet power redefines relational dynamics. In the presence of her silence, men are forced to confront dependency, entitlement, and the assumptions they carry about access and control. They are compelled to observe themselves, to question motives, and to navigate desire in a way that does not rely on domination or coercion. Her presence, calibrated with intentional quiet, becomes a mirror of unacknowledged truths and latent longings. This is the essence of shadow work. Through her, the unconscious aspects of the masculine psyche are revealed, not by confrontation, but by reflection, projection, and the magnetic tension she maintains between availability and autonomy. Yet within her own interior world, she is not defined by the effects she has on others. She moves through life with a sovereignty born of self-knowledge, integrity, and conscious alignment. She recognizes that the magnetism of her silence is a natural byproduct of wholeness, rather than a tool for manipulation. Each moment of quiet, each deliberate pause, is a reaffirmation of her boundaries, her priorities, and her energetic integrity. She inhabits her life fully, consciously navigating her relationships and engagements according to the principles of autonomy and self-respect. In doing so, she cultivates not just attraction, but influence, not through pursuit or compliance, but through the palpable force of alignment and presence. Her quiet also fosters a unique form of intimacy, one that transcends verbal interaction. Men feel it in subtle ways, in the resonance of shared space, in the power of observation without intrusion, in the unspoken acknowledgement that she is fully present yet wholly untethered. The silent woman teaches, without words, that emotional depth, curiosity, and authenticity are the cornerstones of meaningful connection. She demonstrates that attraction is not transactional, and influence is not conditional. Her presence is both gentle and formidable, nurturing yet inviolable, tender yet impossibly magnetic. In every encounter, she challenges others to recognize the value of autonomy, the potency of silence, and the irresistible gravity of a woman who owns herself completely. The silent woman's mastery of these dynamics is a living lesson in Jungian psychology. Desire, projection, and shadow work converge in the magnetic field she cultivates simply by being aligned with her own truth. Men cannot resist her, not because she chases, manipulates, or performs, but because her authenticity resonates with a universal pattern within the unconscious, the archetype of the feminine who is whole, sovereign, and unbound. This resonance is primal, compelling, and enduring. It is a force that cannot be manufactured, borrowed, or coerced. It exists in the quiet authority of self-possession, in the subtle yet irresistible presence of a woman who speaks through action, stillness, and the deep gravity of her integrity. What unsettles men most in the presence of such a woman is not her silence itself, but what that silence symbolizes. It represents an end to their assumptions of entitlement, a dismantling of the unconscious belief that they are owed her attention, her emotions, her constant availability. In Jungian terms, it is the collapse of a projection, the shattering of the fantasy that she exists to orbit their desires or confirm their sense of dominance. Her detachment is not a withdrawal of love, but the revelation of selfhood. It whispers to the man's unconscious, "I am not yours to possess, I am mine to protect." This message reverberates through the corridors of his psyche, stirring both fascination and fear, for it demands that he confront the truth of his own dependency. Silence, in her embodiment, becomes a boundary without need of explanation. She does not argue, plead, or defend her choices. She simply refrains, and in that restraint, her decision is absolute. This restraint recalls the Stoics, who taught that true strength lies not in the noise of constant reaction, but in the composure of self-command. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed by the color of its thoughts. The silent woman has chosen her color carefully, refusing to let another stain her with drama, chaos, or unworthiness. She rests in herself, and that rest creates the aura of an impenetrable fortress, not of isolation, but of sovereignty. Men sense this fortress instinctively. They circle it, drawn by the paradox of its walls. The more unshakable her silence, the more irresistible her presence. It is not cruelty that holds them captive, but the inexplicable magnetism of her refusal to surrender her autonomy. In that silence, their own unresolved wounds rise to the surface. They feel the echoes of abandonment, of childhood neglect, of unhealed insecurities. They want her attention not simply because she withholds it, but because her quiet forces them to face themselves in the absence of her validation. And yet, rather than diminishing her allure, this confrontation with self only amplifies it. They mistake the ache for longing, the discomfort for desire. Her silence also dismantles the illusion of control. Many men are accustomed to the belief that attraction can be managed through words, charm, persistence, or pressure. But when confronted with a woman who does not respond, who does not bend or explain, that illusion dissolves. In its place, a deeper truth emerges. Attraction is not controlled, it is evoked, and what is evoked cannot be forced. Jung spoke of the anima, the feminine archetype residing within the male unconscious, shaping his perceptions of women and relationships. The silent woman awakens this anima, but she does so without effort, without intention, simply by embodying her own authenticity. She becomes the mirror through which he encounters the depths of his own inner feminine, his longing for mystery, for nurturing, for transcendence. This is why men cannot resist her. Not because she is manipulative, nor because she plays calculated games, but because she is the embodiment of what they unconsciously seek, a presence that is whole, untamed, and beyond their control. Her silence strips away the illusion of power dynamics, revealing instead the raw truth of attraction rooted in archetypal longing. To stand before her is to stand before the unknown, the ungraspable, the unexplainable. And men, for all their desire for certainty, are most drawn to that which transcends it. Yet, she is not defined by the reactions she provokes. The essence of her silence is not a strategy, but a natural unfolding of self-respect and clarity. She knows that her worth is not measured by how much she gives, how much she explains, or how much she softens her boundaries to accommodate another. Instead, her worth radiates in the space she claims for herself, in the serenity with which she inhabits her own being. She does not chase, she does not plead, she does not bend. She simply is. And in that state of being, she becomes the flame to which the moths of masculine insecurity and longing are drawn. Still, her silence is not absence of love, nor a rejection of intimacy. It is the refining fire through which only the worthy can pass. The man who can sit with her silence, who can bear the discomfort of his own projections without demanding she ease them, is the one who glimpses her true essence. For silence is a filter, separating the impatient from the patient, the shallow from the deep, the entitled from the reverent. It does not repel love, it purifies it, ensuring that what remains is not hunger disguised as affection, but devotion born of respect. The paradox remains: the quieter she becomes, the more a man feels the storm within himself. He finds himself circling, wondering, questioning, pulled into her gravity as though by an unseen hand. He tells himself he wants answers, but what he truly wants is her presence, her energy, her essence, her authenticity. He cannot resist because her silence has awakened the part of him that no words can satisfy, the primal unconscious desire to encounter what is real, unshakable, and beyond possession. To the untrained eye, her silence may appear as passivity, as though she is withholding out of fear or uncertainty. But the truth is far more dangerous and magnetic. Her silence is active. It is a choice, a discipline, a sword sheathed not because it lacks sharpness, but because she wields control over when, how, and whether it will be drawn. In this sense, silence becomes her language, more eloquent than 1,000 words. It tells the story of her self-possession, her refusal to be rushed, her rejection of the demand to be endlessly available. Men feel the weight of this active silence, and it unsettles them because it communicates what they cannot negotiate away: her independence. Carl Jung taught that what we repress in ourselves is often projected outward onto others. A man standing before the silent woman feels this phenomenon acutely. He projects onto her the mystery he has repressed in himself, the longing for depth he has silenced, the vulnerability he has hidden behind bravado. In her stillness, All of this surges forward, pulling him into a dance with his own shadow. He may call it attraction, fascination, even obsession, but what he truly encounters is the reflection of his unlived inner life. The more silent she remains, the more vivid this reflection becomes, until he is no longer sure whether he desires her or the forgotten parts of himself she awakens. The silent woman knows this unconsciously. Her silence is not designed to entrap, but to preserve. In withholding her energy, she protects the sanctity of her inner world, ensuring that only those capable of respecting her essence may step close. This is why her quiet is irresistible, because it does not seek to capture, it compels others to rise. Men sense that they must ascend to meet her, rather than drag her down into their chaos. Her presence becomes a proving ground, and silence becomes the test. In Stoic philosophy, restraint is not weakness but mastery, the ability to govern oneself in the midst of external noise. Epictetus reminded us that no man is free who is not master of himself. The silent woman embodies this truth. Her refusal to speak when speaking would dilute her truth is not submission, but sovereignty. Each time she chooses not to explain, she teaches a lesson, that her existence is not dependent on external validation. She reveals that love, respect, and desire cannot be demanded. They must be earned, and they must align with integrity. Men cannot resist this because it strips them of shortcuts. They cannot charm their way through her silence. They cannot guilt her into giving more than she chooses. They cannot manipulate what will not react. This unnerves them, but it also awakens their deepest respect. To be in her orbit is to realize that real intimacy requires patience, reverence, and surrender to mystery. Her silence demands the collapse of ego, because ego thrives on noise, on affirmation, on reaction, on constant proof. When none of that is offered, the man must either retreat or evolve. And those who evolve, who learn to sit with the discomfort, discover a bond that transcends superficial attraction. Her quiet also carries with it an erotic charge. It is not the silence of absence, but of intensity contained. Like a flame burning behind glass, it illuminates without consuming. Men sense the energy beneath the surface, the unspoken depths, and it stirs in them both hunger and reverence. This is the paradox of her allure. By saying less, she reveals more. By withholding, she amplifies. Her silence speaks to something primal, reminding the masculine that true desire is not in possession but in pursuit, not in conquest but in wonder. Jung's archetypal language helps us see this clearly. The silent woman aligns with the anima figure, not as a projection of what the man wishes her to be, but as a living embodiment of what he must discover within himself. She is the mirror of his unconscious, reflecting the feminine depths he has ignored. Her silence forces him inward, pressing him to question his needs, his fears, his attachments. He may resist this at first, misinterpreting her quiet as indifference, but soon he realizes that it is the very silence that awakens his truest yearning, to connect, not with a surface, but with a soul. And yet, while men may be captivated, she is not waiting for their transformation. Her silence is not an invitation, but a declaration. She does not pause for him, she pauses for herself. She is not silent so he may learn, but because she has learned. The effect it has on him is incidental, though powerful. It is his work to reckon with it, his journey to understand why he cannot let her go, why the memory of her quiet gaze, her calm detachment, lingers long after her absence. She is irresistible precisely because she does not try to be. She has reclaimed her silence from a world that demands constant explanation, and in doing so, she becomes untouchable, unforgettable, and uncontainable. The man may call it mystery, but she knows it is simply truth, the truth of a woman who belongs to herself. There is a moment every man faces when standing before the silent woman, the confrontation with emptiness. In the spaces where words once filled, where reassurances and explanations might have poured endlessly, there is now only quiet. And in that quiet he hears not her voice, but his own, the unexamined doubts, the buried insecurities, the restless hunger for affirmation. What he once mistook as her absence is, in reality, his exposure. Silence holds up a mirror, and what it reflects is often unbearable. Jung called this the encounter with the shadow, the fragments of self that have been denied, rejected, or hidden. Her silence does not create these shadows, it only reveals them. To the man who lives shallowly, her silence feels like cruelty. He perceives rejection in her restraint, abandonment in her independence. Yet, for the man willing to face his own depths, her silence becomes a rare gift. It calls him to mature beyond egoic demands, to let go of the fantasy that women exist as extensions of his validation. In this way, she is both temptation and teacher, drawing out his best or exposing his worst. Men cannot resist her not only because of desire, but because her silence challenges them in ways no words ever could. She awakens the part of them that longs for wholeness. Her quiet radiates a paradoxical strength. It is soft yet immovable, tender yet unyielding. It resembles the still surface of deep water, concealing power beneath calm. The silent woman knows that energy wasted on explanations often feeds those who do not deserve access. She knows that her presence is valuable, and that her quiet is not an absence of response, but the highest form of response, one that says, "I will not waste my soul proving my worth." This restraint is intoxicating because it stands in defiance of the noise-driven culture, where attention is given cheaply and boundaries dissolve at the first sign of pressure. In the silence, men are left to imagine. They imagine her thoughts, her reasons, her emotions, and in doing so, they amplify her presence in their minds far beyond what constant communication ever could. Mystery is magnetic, and nothing cultivates mystery more effectively than deliberate quiet. But it is not a game of withholding, it is the simple reality that her inner world is hers alone. What she chooses to reveal is precious because it is rare, and rarity commands reverence. Men are drawn like moths not just to her flame, but to the darkness that surrounds it, the unknown, the unknowable, the infinite depth they cannot conquer. Stoic philosophy reminds us that detachment is power. Seneca wrote that true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence on the future. The silent woman embodies this principle. She is not rushing to fill space, not scrambling to secure his approval, not anxiously ensuring she is understood. She inhabits her present with composure, choosing when to give, when to hold back, when to simply exist in her own company. This serenity unsettles men precisely because it cannot be controlled. They crave what they cannot dominate, and they cannot dominate what is content in itself. Her silence is also erotic, though not in the way the world imagines. It is not seduction through performance, but allure through restraint. The more she withholds words, the more each glance, each subtle gesture becomes charged with meaning. A look becomes an entire dialogue, a pause becomes a story. Men lean closer, waiting, yearning, craving the moment she will open the door to her inner world. And when she does, when she speaks sparingly and with intent, her words strike with the force of arrows, unforgettable and piercing. The scarcity of her expression makes it sacred, and the man finds himself treasuring every fragment as though it were a revelation. Jung would say that the silent woman embodies individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating the fragmented self into a unified being. She is not fragmented by the noise of external validation, nor diluted by the need to please. She is whole, and in her wholeness she becomes irresistible, because men unconsciously crave what they lack. They sense her integrity, her self-containment, her unshakable grounding, and they are drawn to it as if to water in a desert. She is the oasis they cannot own, the river they cannot dam, the ocean they cannot map. Yet she does not remain silent forever. Her voice, when given, is an offering, not a performance. She speaks only when her words carry weight, when they reflect her truth rather than appease expectation. This balance between silence and speech is what makes her so magnetic. She is not withholding to punish, but selective to preserve. And men, who are often used to abundance in words but scarcity in meaning, cannot resist the one who reverses this order: scarcity in words, abundance in meaning. Her silence teaches that true power is not loud, and true desire is not desperate. It reveals that the woman who belongs to herself does not need to convince, perform, or chase. She stands still, and the world rearranges itself around her. Men feel this gravitational pull, and though they may never fully understand it, they cannot resist it. For her silence is not emptiness, it is fullness contained, a universe held within a single pause. When silence ripens into sovereignty, the game between man and woman changes forever. For what was once a pursuit rooted in ego becomes a pilgrimage of reverence. The silent woman no longer attracts through performance, but through presence. She does not need to argue her worth. Her very being commands recognition. And here lies the ultimate paradox. By no longer seeking to be irresistible, she becomes untouchably so. The man, still tethered to his projections and cravings, circles around her like a moth drawn to a flame that does not burn out. He may not even know why, but he feels it. In her silence there is no hook, no bait, no plea. Only the echo of eternity, which makes his hunger ache sharper and his admiration deepen beyond words. Carl Jung taught that individuation is the process of becoming whole, not by denying what is dark, but by embracing it. And the silent woman embodies this wisdom. She has met her shadows in the hidden chambers of her heart. She has acknowledged envy, rage, desire, fear, not to be enslaved by them but to integrate them into her tapestry of selfhood. In doing so, she no longer needs to scream her pain into the world. She wears it like an invisible crown, a mark of passage. Men sense this even if they cannot name it. They feel the gravity of a woman who is not fighting with herself, and they are both terrified and fascinated by it. Silence, then, is not about withholding words but about transcending noise. It is not passive, it is not weakness. It is an act of rebellion in a culture addicted to self-disclosure and endless validation. It is a return to the temple within, where the feminine archetype reigns not as a victim but as a queen. Imagine standing in front of a storm that does not rage outward but folds inward, gathering force in invisible spirals. This is her power. This is why men find themselves restless in her presence. She does not mirror back their egos, nor does she fill the silence with excuses. She simply stands, and in that stillness, their own unspoken fears surface like ghosts. The Stoics spoke of equanimity, of meeting life's chaos without trembling. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The silent woman has taken this truth into her marrow. She no longer contorts herself to win affection or anxiously explains her choices. She walks away from insult with dignity, from chaos with poise, from noise with serenity. And what is more irresistible to a man than a woman who cannot be pulled into his storms? He may test her, provoke her, even try to unravel her composure. Yet every attempt only tightens the thread of his fascination, because she refuses to give him the one thing he secretly expects: emotional dependence. But this journey is not about him. It is about her liberation. For silence also teaches her that she was never made to be understood in fragments, never made to beg for scraps of love. She begins to see that true intimacy arises not when she explains herself into exhaustion, but when she rests fully in her essence. This is not the silence of submission, but of transcendence. It is the silence that belongs to women who have walked through fire and discovered that their voice does not need to scream to be heard, it only needs to be lived. The man who encounters such a woman stands before a mirror of his own unfinished work. He feels the urge to chase, to decode, to possess. Yet he also feels the weight of her sovereignty pressing into his spirit, forcing him to ask, "What is within me that I fear to face?" And in this alchemy, her silence becomes not just irresistible but transformative. It does not merely magnetize him, it challenges him. It pulls him toward the edges of his own shadow, daring him to grow or to flee. Here, at the end of the path, the silent woman emerges not as a mystery to be solved, but as a force to be honored. She no longer trembles at abandonment, no longer bargains for affection. She has seen herself clearly and embraced the paradox of being whole yet ever unfinished. Her silence is no longer armor but atmosphere, no longer a defense but a declaration, I am. And in that declaration, she awakens a deeper law of attraction, one rooted not in need, but in choice. For the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.